In need of a new infantry rifle and seeking out the best, the Qing government would inadvertently provide Germany with another reserve weapon for the Great War. Hi, I'm Othais, and this is the Mauser Model 1907, and while mine differs a little bit from the Chinese version, it's in a lot better shape than anything that made it over there, so let's work with what we've got and take a look over at the light box. At 49 inches in length and 8.8 pounds in weight, this gun is very similar to the previous Ottoman 1903. It does, however, chamber the 7x57mm cartridge as presented today, although it was available in a number of different chamberings as we'll see. Always 5 rounds, staggered, flush, stripper clip. For anyone curious, this episode is going to be just a bit short because it was paired for release with the previous, also miniature episode, on the Ottoman 1903 and a brief mention of the Paraguayan 1907 rifles. Watch them together to get your full experience. For now, however, we're going to have to start with a little bit of a detour to China. The Qing government had adopted the German Gewehr 1888 and established local production in Hanyang in 1895. While they had adopted the 7.92mm cartridge as well, the Qing had the same doubts as Germany and started arguing about the merits of something down to 6.5mm like the Japanese were using, flat shooting, long range, or the larger, heavier hitting 7.92 that they were currently using. This went back and forth until a compromise was reached. 7mm Mauser was so very close to what they chose, but they did not. Instead, they designed their own 6.8mm cartridge. I mean, nearly identical as 7mm Mauser, just tight enough on the bore to cause problems for collectors, thanks guys. And I've read the case was chosen to make conversion of existing rifles easier, being acceptable in length for both the Gewehr 88 and large stocks of Mannlicher straight pulls that were available in China at the time. At least one Mannlicher Schonauer has turned up in this cartridge, meaning that the Chinese officials likely solicited examples from several manufacturers before deciding what they wanted. And interestingly, both of the rifles from our last episode are what I would call pattern breakers, more so the Paraguayan 1907, because at the time they were adopted, Paul Mauser was already pushing something of a different vision for a standardized rifle. One that would become known as the 1904 pattern. This gun was essentially a slightly upgraded version of Mauser's trials guns for Germany. Mauser's 98 cock-on open action, staggered, double stack, 5-round magazine stripper clip feed, wrap-around half-length handguard, full stock, and the new deep-seated lug bayonet attachment, though often lacking the larger German H-band reinforcement. These guns were produced in just about every cartridge and caliber, and Mauser used them to tempt both new and old customers into adopting the superior 98 after having spread that 93 so wide. We got a whiff of this rifle back in our Portuguese Vaqueiro episode, as it was the Mauser rifle that was merged with the Mannlicher, making for one weird duck. You can still see its influence clearly though. Anyway, the Chinese obviously turned to Germany, like I said, and they would adopt the German 1904 export pattern rifle, just chambered in their unique cartridge. At the same time, Brazil would also approach Mauser and purchase the same rifle. Theirs chambered in 7x57, which is not confusing at all. Both guns would become the Model 1907 and are marked as such on the side rails. Ours today, which is both good and bad, is a Brazilian. Obviously, I'd prefer to have the exact gun I want to cover, but the Chinese issued rifles are usually deep fried and pre-shrunk, and as we're gonna see, the other variant to this is extremely rare, so we'll take what we can get. But let's get back to the story. China has a new rifle. The Guangzhou Type 33, a bog standard export Mauser in their own cartridge, and thankfully matched to the 1907 that we have here, and so I think we can take a closer look. Alright gang, this is the Brazilian pattern of the gun, and there's a little difference here, more on that in a second, but let's get her walked in. We've got a semi-pistol grip stock, rear sling swivel, we walk forward, Mauser 98 action with, in this case, Interestingly, a carbine bolt has made it onto this gun. This is a turn down bolt. It should be a straight 90-degree angle. I'm not sure what happened there, but because of the intermediate length on these, or the unusual length of these rather, I have to use this bolt. It wasn't like I could grab a 98 and shove it in there. So we walk forward. Unlike our previous Ottoman, we have a very normal, shallow clip bridge because it can use those teeth to bite in and take up less metal. We're on to the usual Mauser 98 action, full extractor, all the goodies. Nice and silver, nice and clean in there. And then if we look, we've got a Mauser commercial banner right here. And then interestingly, this gun's lived some sort of bizarre life because somebody tried mounting something to it at some point. We have 4 screw holes here. I doubt that was for an optic. That would be really weird. And if it was, it would have failed. I'm not sure if this had a vanity plate or was mounted to some other object as a display, but regardless, they're there and they don't seem to be causing any harm to the rifle other than just, you know, lightening it up a bit. But let's walk around back and we'll look at the rear sight. This is where we've had a lot of curiosity because some of these early Mausers have had features that we don't see in the later ones, which is the, oh yeah, eeny, meeny, miny, and mo. This has the 50-meter incremental push buttons, alternating buttons that we saw from the Gewehr 98 on a flat tangent leaf sight with full wood protection, a very high wood at the rear. I'm almost surprised this hasn't been damaged, but apparently it's quite strong. So let's keep on going forward. Half-length upper handguard, full length, full stock. There's our swivel at the front. And then if I can keep us in frame, we're at to the very unique looking front bayonet lug, which is the full Mauser 98 pattern, but with the shallower front locking surface. This does not have the massive and complicated H-band. This is probably a lot cheaper and faster to make. We still have our parade swivel link right there, clearing rod, standard looking front sight, you know, the usual. But this pattern is actually more of what you saw coming from Paul Mauser, suggested to the German army, and yet it was not adopted. They went for that big H lug. And you can spot this on this gun from a mile away. Fairly clearly marks it out in old photos. You'll also see this on certain Chinese guns other than the standard, like the Manchurian Mausers. Those tend to have it, so just keep an eye out. You'll find it in surprising places. Let me walk this on back. And then otherwise, basically just a beautiful plain gun. No stock reinforcing lug, no hand grip, none of that. Just sleek and clean all the way down the gun. Since mechanically, internally, this is the same as the Gewehr 98, I think we can skip the animation and go straight to the live fire. Now, while this was not in 6.8mm, the gun I really want to cover today wasn't either, but we'll get there in a moment. I have heard 20,000 Mauser 1907s were ordered by China. A committee report from 1907 lists 3,300 rifles shipped, though as we'll see, up to 8,000 may have gone out. These are of course very small numbers because China wanted to begin their own domestic production. DWM was contracted to help set up the Guangdong arsenal, which was delayed not just by limited infrastructural support and finances, but also by, well, revolution, which is going to be a recurring theme for a lot of these export Mausers. The Xinhai Revolution saw the Qing dynasty outed and the Republic of China emerging in 1911. Thankfully, the new guys still liked the rifle and they rebranded it the First Year Rifle, or Type 1. On a side note, this should not be confused with the Japanese-made, Italian-issued World War II era Type I rifle, I as in Italian, 1 as in first year of the Republic. The Type I's often get called Type 1s by collectors reading, well, poor typography. The Type 1, well, the Chinese government ordered it into production at all capable state arsenals excepting Hanyang. They got to keep making the 88, sort of. It would evolve a bit. The Republic didn't pick up the tab on the German orders, by the way, so this left Mauser Oberndorf holding a pile of completed rifles, and there they sat until, much later, war were declared. When the German government blocked exports of small arms and came around for an inventory of what they could buy in a hurry, Mauser had some 12,000 Chinese contract 1907s on hand. This was, of course, during the same survey that found those Paraguayan 1907s we mentioned last episode. And though the Paraguayans looked more familiar, they were harder to convert to the domestic 7.92 cartridge thanks to their shorter overall receiver length having been made for 7.65. So while the Ottomans got the Paraguayans, the Germans could actually convert and use the 7x57mm Chinese rifles very easily, and they took them over and converted them to 7.92 by 57, the good old 8mm Spitzer. Hard hitting and handy as ever, the Mauser 98 action had already been made for this, so it was a simple changeover. The process was handled not by an arsenal, but by private industry, Oscar Will in Zella Mellis. If that name sounds familiar, it's because that's the same firm that whipped up the simplified Gewehr 88 conversion to stripper clips. Man, they'll convert anything. It's actually interesting to note that eventually China would also rechamber their guns to 7.92, reverting to the German cartridge in 1915. This was thanks to both difficulties with domestic production of ammunition, and because the Spitzer bullet had solved that big bore, small bore problem in the meantime. Back in Germany, the rifles were issued with 4.5 reserve corps formed in 1914 and a smattering of Prussian units. At least one comment has been recorded on the rifles, but it was in a litany of early war equipment complaints saying that the Chinese guns were inferior to the German 98 and broke firing pins. I have no means to disprove that complaint, nor really any way of confirming it. I can't see why they would be so fragile unless something was off in the conversion process. It was suggested, however, that this failure happened in combat, so that's a little bit of a hint that the 1907s may have seen actual frontline use. Since we don't have a lot of hard data on this gun, and I don't want to go too far into speculating, let's go ahead and go with what we do know, Mae and her opinion. Alright gang, once more we've made room for Mae, and we have a very familiar looking rifle in the sense that we've been in this 98 sort of export series, but this time it's been finalized. So the Ottoman was a move in this direction, and then finally Mauser Oberndorf kind of goes, this is what an export Mauser should be. So this gun is the gun that Paul Mauser sold to the world in this configuration with that lug, with those bands, all of the details, except the long rifles would have had straight bolt handles, but I'll let Mae talk about that. So get us through the ergonomics on this gun, especially compared to last time.
Yep, like Othais said, turn down bolt. I can imagine what a straight bolt would be like, so we're not really going to get into that. In my head, and you as the viewers keep that in mind, that's what it needs to be. So the difference is the clip bridge on this one, it's not as pronounced, but it is still pretty tall, and I don't have to worry about thumbing that little piece of metal off to the side. It's all just fixed here, so that's nice. But hey, I had no problem stripping rounds off in here or fitting the stripper clip in. It fit perfectly and it worked well. The bayonet bayonet lug on this one, like we mentioned, is different. I did notice there's a lot more metal here in order for me to have a lot more room for my bayonet to fit onto something. It feels much more positive of a grip. Although I do notice that the bayonet lug is still right here with the barrel, so I'm wondering how that affects harmonics a little bit there.
The idea is that the change is born in the band and not on the barrel itself. Like no pressure is exerted at the muzzle of the barrel. It is exerted on the front band, and the front band is supposed to put even pressure on the barrel regardless of the lug or not. That's the idea. Now in practice, if it gets loose and it starts to pinch and you start to see some shift, it should still theoretically be less than having a muzzle band exactly at the very, I mean, think about it, the crown, that area right at the end, that's where a lot of your performance is gained or lost, or at least repeatable. And trying to do a distortion right at the very end versus even moving that distortion lower, it's kind of better to move it lower. So that's the idea. So this has the deep lug, and don't be confused by the band. The lug is set down in there.
Yes.
The band is just very shallow because I suppose Oberndorf thought this band was perfectly adequate for providing the yoke that this system needed.
Which, I mean, again, we don't do the bayonet testing, but for me, I just didn't, I agree. It doesn't seem like it's that big of a deal.
It's also weird because how would we, like if we were to try to bayonet test that, the only way to prove a failure on that is to crack the end off the gun.
Don't want to do that.
Yeah, it's not our ballpark.
The only other thing I really wanted to mention, the sight on this one. So I've noticed it looks a little bit thinner than the previous, the Ottoman 1903. But hey, I've still got my...
Yeah, that's rapid.
I can still do my step forward there. And honestly, I thought this one was a little bit smoother. It might just be the wear on that one, or I'm not sure, but this one worked out very well. Otherwise, weight, length, semi-pistol grip, decent comb height, nothing else really that much different there from our Ottoman 1903.
You'd be hard-pressed one shoulder to tell the difference between this and the Ottoman. I mean, it's incremental, and tiny fractions of incremental change.
Now, I will say this particular piece actually does have a lot more wear on it, and that you can tell the previous owner,
they drilled something into the side of it. I don't know what's going on there.
It's been through a lot, yet performance, it was pretty good still. It's still very smooth, and it survived. It did survive the test of time.
So let's talk about shooting a little bit, actually, because this one is, now this is where we get into, again, imagination land. This one is as conceived in 7x57. That was a cartridge that Paul Mauser liked a lot. It was the cartridge that they shipped off to South America for the most part. And then China adopted something extremely similar in 6.8, but not quite 7mm. But still, I don't know that you could tell the difference between shooting a Chinese 1907 6.8 from a South American in 7. I don't know that you could notice much.
Honestly, I don't think I would.
I can't conceive of it. From the data I've seen on those two cartridges, they're close enough together. I don't see it. The problem we're going to run into is that you fired this gun in 7, and yet in the Great War, it would have been chambered for 7.92. And the one advantage we have to that is you have fired 7.92 out of a Gewehr 98, which is technically as heavy as this gun, as long as this gun. It's all in that same performance range. So you can probably envision both. Do you have a preference between, like, talk about shooting this, and then I'd like to know, would you have preferred it in a different cartridge? So,
obviously, guys, a lot of this is going to be similar to the 1903. The sights, the trigger, the recoil is not going to be that much different between the two. From what I know, 7.65 and 7mm. Now, the difference between 7 and 8, honestly, if I try to think back on it, I don't think I am perceiving that much of a difference. Maybe a little, maybe a little more recoil with 8mm, but it's so hard to discern that difference, even though I shot both the same rifles on the same day.
And the other thing is we're only shooting at 100 yards. So the flatter shooting 7, you're not going to see a big change in that either. No,
I don't think my groupings were that much different, to be honest.
Which cartridge would you prefer if you were given your choice?
If I was given my choice, I would definitely go with the 7mm. I think it's a better cartridge overall.
And a lot of that is borne out by your experience with carbines, because the lighter the gun gets, the more that 7mm starts to feel better than, say, 8mm.
It just feels better overall. It'll do decent in a long rifle, do decent in a carbine. Like it's just the cartridge that I think is the most universal cartridge.
Yeah, I would agree with that. So if you were given one of these with a straight bolt handle, sorry guys, and with 7.92, sorry guys, we do what we can. Would you feel confident with that in the war? Like, would that be something that you would like to go and use in battle compared to, say, the standard infantry Gewehr 98?
obviously, guys, this one has to get a yes. I mean, do I wish it were a little bit shorter? Yes. Do I wish it were in 7mm Mauser? Yes, I think that would be great.
The theoretical one.
The theoretical one. Yeah. No. I know this one is, and again, obviously straight bolt, but yeah, definitely. I would take this into battle. It performs so well. Even showing all the wear and tear on this one, it definitely went the distance, which was fantastic. If I had to choose between this and a Gewehr 98, I'd be taking this one all day long. It's got the improved sight. It's got a decent cartridge in it. Yeah, this one was definitely a big plus over the other one, I would say, improvement wise.
Yeah, I like the flat tangent leaf sight much better than the long of a Zier. And that's the big difference between this and the Gewehr 98.
And we've got a little bit of extra wood here on the handguard.
That's true. It's better heat dissipation. You would much rather shoot this with a 25 round trench magazine than you would that Gewehr 98.
Although I do miss my grasping grooves.
But those were only added during the war, and the Gewehr 98 that you shot this time around did not have them. You've shot them both ways before, though.
Yes.
So I don't know about the grasping grooves. Maybe it's because my hand's so large, but
it might be.
I don't think they add enough value in order to weaken the wood in that spot. And it's not really a strong weakening, but I don't want to dish that wood out any more than I have to. Right where I'm going to hold the gun after it's going to get hot, I want as much sort of thermal density as I can get right there. So I'll take it without the grasping grooves. That's fine by me.
He was just scarred by the Gewehr 98.
That thing was hot. Little bit. That was a hot gun. So, I mean, it's an obvious yes, but in terms of the Mauser family now, how close are we getting to your favorite Mauser?
There are a lot of Mausers out there in the Mauser family. There's a lot of them to pick from, but definitely the Serbian Carbine is probably my favorite. So this one I would probably put as a good solid number 2. And I mean, the Serbian Carbine was also in 7mm, which was a 7mm Mauser, which is fantastic. But this one's definitely high up there. I mean, we still have one more Mauser to test though for this whole Mauser streak we're doing. So who knows? Maybe it'll get knocked down again.
That's true. In terms of the Mauser long rifles, for whatever reason, it might just be this gun. The 1907 right here has been my favorite. Like, I actually like shooting this gun. This is one of those ones that was not loaned. We just acquired because of its mixed status and weird configuration. It was not expensive. And so this is one of the ones I actually just like to shoot. Like, this is with 7mm with this size, it's a very comfortable gun to work with. And it's become a personal sort of, and again, it's very subjective and it's probably ruined my objectivity. I quite like this pattern. This may be my favorite pattern as well for the long Mauser rifles.
You just love that they kept your sight.
We'll talk more about that in a moment, but or not in a moment, but in the next episode. But I agree with Mae. It's a little long for the kind of combat you start to see by the time you get into World War I.
Yes.
A carbine version would be probably superior. And even if you had to go back to the 93 pattern, it would probably be superior to have it in a short rifle or carbine pattern.
And then again, we'd switch from 8mm Mauser to 7mm Mauser because again, that just would work better universally.
That's true. I am thinking of this in 7. I wouldn't love it nearly as much in 8.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you all. Hope you had a good one, and check after the credits for an update.
Bye, guys.
Alright gang, nothing new to report because we are nose to the grindstone trying to pull ahead. We're not doing any fancy cool stuff, just working hard. But in the meantime, if you are a patron or would like to be one, there is a podcast-like experience that is happening for all of you about 24 hours after each episode of Primer releases. These are linked on Patreon and Subscribestar for everyone who is signed up. So that's all the way down to the $1 level. Come support the show, hear a little bit of behind the scenes. We'll try to keep it interesting for you. All right, have a good one.